Welcome to the NC DWI Guy podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NC DWI Guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to another episode of the NC DWI Guy podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Tim Henderson, who is at the Public Defender's Office. Very excited to have you on, Tim. A couple of things that I think really stand out about how you represent people. First of all, you really have a way of bringing people's humanity in front of the court in a kind of tender and humorous way. I don't know if you are always focused in on that, but I think that is something that really separates you from a lot of us criminal defense attorneys. You have a really good way of bringing that. And then secondly, you just have this incredible knack for just bringing humor in general to the court and kind of lightening things up and taking cases, giving cases the appropriate seriousness that they should have, which a lot of times is very little in criminal district court. So I appreciate that when I see it with DAs, criminal defense attorneys, whether it's in the public defenders or private counsel, anybody that can kind of appropriately look at a case and say, this is serious or this is stupid. So I'm excited to have you on.
Oh, thanks, man. I try to be tender with all of my clients.
There's just, I think that sometimes in district court representation can become so routine, right? Like, the mechanics of how a DWI is going to work and what you're going to say. It's very formulaic, and you just have this ability. I don't know. I'd be kind of interested to hear how you do this with clients. Like, you have this ability to spend just a couple of minutes with the judge, bringing to the fore something very interesting about the client's treatment, their background, what they're doing currently. It's not presented in this here's the pointers that I have to hit. It's like, let me tell you something interesting about my client. How do you do that, especially with such a large caseload?
I think a lot of it is, just realizing the nature of the enterprise that you have to do in district court. It can be a lot of drudgery if that's the way your mindset's going to have it. I think that for me, the way that I keep myself kind of engaged with the caseload, which can be pretty voluminous, is to try to find that extra wrinkle about what makes everybody, every defendant, every witness their own sort of snowflake, and realizing that you do have an audience. It's the judge for one. It's the other attorneys in the courtroom. It's also everybody else that's there. And I think treating things with a level of seriousness is really important. I'm not going to start doing a stand-up routine when I'm dealing with a misdemeanor death by motor vehicle charge.
Right.
But some sets of facts just lend themselves to a little bit of extra color or humor, and in a bond hearing or even during a plea, those things, dependent on the right judge, can at least kind of break up the tedium that all of us are facing. I've been doing this for a while. I am one of the supervising attorneys in district court. So when I'm doing something, I'm also kind of setting an example for the other attorneys on the team to kind of, give them ideas for how to approach cases as well. And, public defenders, I would say unjustifiably, but, there's stereotypes about us being overworked and, poorly dressed and sort of unkempt, which I'm doing my best to live up to. But, it's for the whole courtroom to kind of be like, the guy that's sitting there waiting on Casterline to show up, who's wondering, what the hell, what is this public defender doing? Where is this person? To kind of be like, hey, we can do law things too. Look at me, we're doing a good job to sort of reinforce everybody's faith in the system.
Yeah,
I have to be. Go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim, but I think it's just so. Again, it's just rare to see that from really kind of like, again, public attorney or private attorney, there was a family law judge that used to put pictures of the kids that she was handling in district court in each file, because a lot of times the kids aren't even in the courtroom when you're making important decisions. And so it's kind of like trying to remember that this is not just like a case number file. There's a person behind this. And again, I just think that you have a really powerful way of kind of breaking up the tedium that the judge is looking at and basically saying, let me show a little bit of the humanity of my client. This is not just another file. We did check all the boxes, Judge, but, my client also, just crushed RHA or, just whatever that kind of unique thing is. You really kind of are able to gravitate toward that and bring it out in front of the judge. And then, like you just said, I think that one of the tediums that we can kind of find ourselves in district court is not recognizing the really kind of like interesting things about the cases that we so often like see, because we just see it so many times. And so when you're in front of a judge, particularly a judge that may be, just difficult to be in the courtroom, you might as well make it kind of fun. And so you just have this great knack for just gravitating towards those pieces of information that allow everybody to just be kind of engaged with what's going on in the courtroom.
This is being recorded.
This is being recorded. So
then I can't think of any judges in Buncombe County who I would describe as being difficult to share a courtroom with.
For the record, let the record reflect that Tim Henderson doesn't have anybody that he is particularly inclined to practice in front of. But I just think that it's such a cool thing to bring to the table. And there's a couple of attorneys in practice that I have seen that have been able to use, humor either to kind of gain, like brownie points for their client, or to just kind of, again, break the ice a little bit with a serious situation that is going on in the courtroom. And you have a way of doing it that is not, annoying or, even I'm trying to think, what is the sarcastic? It's not that. It's something that just really is refreshing.
Well, thanks. It's it's the sort of thing that you got to be careful with how you use. But once you've, so much of this job is just repetition, in good ways too, right? You start to become more mentally flexible and you start to kind of really understand the process, and you can kind of see where there's a little bit of play in the joints where you can get the more human, aspect into it.
Right.
As humans, most of us are idiots, and most of the criminal charges that we deal with radiate and emanate from that basic human condition of idiocy. And when you can sort of reveal the building blocks that led to where we are right now in a way that is subtle and respectful, but just reminds whoever the judge is that, this is why we're here. I mean, you can't really do that for high-level felonies in superior court, but in district court, we get by.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. In terms of your kind of mentor role to the new attorneys that come into the office and kind of helping get them trained and acclimated to district court, what are some of the tips? A lot of the people we're speaking to is kind of geared towards younger attorneys. So what would be kind of some of the advice that you would give to new public defenders in terms of just handling cases in district court?
One of the things that I would say is that it's important to remember when you're starting out that you're probably going to be or at least feel totally worthless and lost for at least the first 6 to 12 months.
Do you tell them that?
I usually wait a couple of months until they get the
let
sort of deer in the headlines.
them feel it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I started here out of law school. I clerked for a judge at the Court of Appeals for a couple of years. In law school, I did more of the sort of intellectual focus. I went to Carolina, and
Yep.
Basically there you're trained to think like a Supreme Court justice, but you don't really get that much practical experience unless you.
I think that's true of all law schools. I mean, maybe it's more true of some than others, but yeah, I think it doesn't provide you with that practical approach to how to handle a traffic ticket.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think that to law students, I mean, the best thing you can do to prepare yourself for this kind of work is, do the semester in practice, do the externship, do whatever clinic you can. I didn't do that, and then I worked for a judge, and then I came here and just mind blown the first week of oh shit, this is real, these are people. I might screw up and they might end up in jail. And these are all natural things to think about. I guess the advice I would give would be to the new public defender or attorney, first of all, most of the people that are your clients that end up in jail did something pretty specific to get there.
Yeah.
That's why you're in court in the first place. And most of the time, there's not that much that you're going to do to prevent them from going. And you're not the one that's going.
Yeah.
And you should take pride in your work and you should help everyone to the extent that you can. But, if we kept score as defense attorneys, we would all quit pretty quickly or just become really depressed, right?
Yeah, there's a attorney that I remember at a CLE that I went to down in Atlanta that once said, "You're not a real DWI attorney until you've lost 10 in a row." Maybe it's even more than that. I don't know. It might be an even higher number, but his point was to basically try a lot of cases because the win-loss percentage is not going to be, in your favor, generally speaking.
Yeah. But that's the only way you learn is through repeatedly failing. Sometimes success we can learn things too, but especially in the public defender's office, our job, frankly, quite often is to lose, but to do so with dignity and aplomb and in a way that mitigates whatever terrible decisions the client has made.
Right.
But, you want to try as many cases as you can
right.
when you're starting out. Now, here in Buncombe, our office is kind of a general practice. There's some other counties. We just hired an attorney from Forsyth who, they have specific courtrooms. And so you just do DV.
Right.
When you're on DV and that's months. And then
right.
maybe you move to traffic court. Here, we kind of have everything. So it's everything from piddling speeding tickets to DWIs to domestic stuff to neighbor disputes and big box larcenies and things like that. And it's just, there's a lot and, you have to keep doing it. You just, after a while, you start to pick up the rhythm of it and things start to slow down. But that, even in a high volume thing like here, it takes months to get your confidence to realize when you get a new case, oh shit, I have sort of seen this before. And you start to be able to put things into blocks mentally to sort of build up your skills and your repertoire of being able how to handle a case, I guess.
I think that it's interesting to think through that because there is such a volume that you get to see kind of right from the get-go. Your caseload is kind of just, there for you. I mean, there's kind of cases waiting for you as soon as you hit the PD's office, I would assume. And so you kind of get your teeth wet maybe faster, but I think until you've done it in front of a judge, again, it doesn't matter what the volume of cases is. That fear just kind of gets into all of us. Yeah.
And it never really fully goes away. You just learn how to sort of ignore it or to kind of manage it productively. Another really good thing to do when you're just starting out is just watch as much court as you can, pick out attorneys, how they do things. Most folks here in Buncombe, I'd imagine just about anywhere, if you ask them questions, they're happy to talk to you. We're all attorneys. We like to hear our own voices and we like to feel smart. So it's never hard to get advice. And the more stuff that you see, the more tricks you steal, the better equipped you are. And, you'll get to a point where, you just sort of, everything kind of translates together. Now you can't get lazy about that and just kind of assume, oh, I know this, I did this 2 weeks ago. So it's a challenge to keep yourself engaged, especially when any given day I'll have like a dozen different clients with different cases and trying to focus, on them and just keep my head above water.
Yeah. And I guess in terms of that part of it, just having a lot of people that you have to interact with regularly, is that part of the, training process as well in terms of just communicating with clients and kind of how that, whether that's in the consultation or not consultation, but like in the interview, if they come in and talk to you, or in the, courtroom, do you kind of go through that as part of the training as well, how to communicate with potential or with clients?
We do, to an extent. A lot of it is just kind of shadowing and seeing how different folks, approach client communications from their first interactions and trial prep and things like that. Everybody has their own style, and there's no right or wrong way to do things. But I think that, especially now that I'm training attorneys more, the first probably 30 seconds of interactions you have with the client set the full tone of everything. Yeah. And if you go in and you start immediately discussing options about how to plead guilty, that's going to set the tone, and that's going to be the direction that it goes. And on some level, that might make your job easier. I don't know that you're really doing it, but it would also be boring. But everybody's different. And so for us, sometimes the clients will reach out before their court dates. It's harder now with COVID because we're not having clients come into the office to talk with us. We can talk on the phone for a bit, but usually I'd say more than half my cases, first time I meet somebody is our first day in court. And, you only have so much time. So you kind of have to be efficient with it. But, the main thing is to convey, here's the situation, here's what I can do as an attorney, what's going on with your case, and try to get them chatting early. That's a good way to kind of feel where they're coming from before you start talking about the legal aspects of it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think especially in terms of not immediately bringing up, here's what the plea offer is, and kind of going from that space without kind of collecting the story. I think one of the things that I found with potential clients that call into the office is just giving them the time to kind of communicate the situation and what happened, impact on their life. That is really the most powerful thing that I think I can do, is just give them the freedom to talk and then ask a lot of detailed questions about what was going on. So I'm showing them that I'm really trying to learn about your case, what attack points that exist. And I think that is something that would be more challenging to kind of appropriately set that tone when, before you've talked with the client, you may have already spoken with the officer, the DA, looked at the file, right? So it definitely is a difficult or more difficult thing where, I'm kind of getting the client's story first, straight from them, and then going and seeing kind of what the officer's report and all that stuff is. You're just kind of hearing the narrative from the other side sometimes first. And so just kind of resetting and thinking, okay, let me kind of go in with a set of fresh eyes and ears once I talk to the client.
Yeah, I think that is kind of important. One of the things when I first started out doing this, you get the officer narrative and you read it and it's like, well, shit, my guy's guilty.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize
that's so true.
Well,
it's so true.
Of course it's going to sound that way because this is a document that is written to justify a charging decision from a very specific point of view. Yeah. And that's not even saying anybody's doing anything corrupt in this. It's just the way that the system churns out paper and churns out people. Yeah. For a DWI, for me, we get our case assignments usually a month or so in advance. And so when I get a case file, I'll immediately kind of order the DWI report from Beth Walker here in Buncombe County in the DA's office. You take a look at that. If I'm able to, I'll get a look at the shuck. Although in the DWI case, the shuck is, I don't know, when I first started, I kept going through expecting to find detailed instructions on how to do my job. But you learn what to look for. You look at the affidavits, you look at the revocation paperwork and all that, and that can give you kind of a basic set of expectations for when you meet the person. But you got to give the person the chance to speak. You have to listen. Yep. I mean, a lot of times people kind of already know which way their case is going. Not all the time, and sometimes they're wrong.
Yep.
But it's their case fundamentally, and my job as an attorney is to know the law and help them understand how the law fits the facts of their case so that they can make an informed decision, because it's their decision.
Yeah. No, I think that is a really kind of powerful way of thinking about it. I guess in a kind of a similar vein, when I get a driving while impaired report back now, I used to kind of send out, here's my thoughts about the driving while impaired report when I would send it to my client or review it with my client. If I would review video at the office with the client, I would kind of, say beforehand, here's what we're going to see. Here's what my opinion is. And now I've just kind of like gone with I'm going to let you look at it with your own eyes, make whatever conclusions, and then you tell me kind of what your thoughts are, questions, because, a lot of times I think that gives people the freedom, again, instead of feeling like they're pigeonholed into this, like, well, we've got to plead guilty. They watch the video and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we don't have a case, right? Like, I mean, there's that kind of like ability to self-assess, or as we're going through it, I point out, here's what the issues are with the case. Here's where, the state has strong points. Here's the weak points. But instead of trying to explain everything without them having anything tangible to hold or something to look at, giving them the ability to make their own conclusions without me kind of getting too into it before they've seen it.
Yeah. And I think, 8 or 9 times out of 10, if you follow that kind of process, the client's going to come around to what your view is anyway. It's
right.
just
right.
not forcing them into it, which is hard because, especially when you're just starting out, like as attorneys, we know all these things and we love to explain things. And especially when you don't have that confidence of having done it over and over again, the main thing that you can jump into to impress a client is to explain everything. But in doing that, it can be counterproductive if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I think that also just kind of goes back to not wanting to look stupid in court, right? None of us want to look dumb in front of a judge, in front of other attorneys. So anytime that you have a case where you're looking at it and you're like, I don't see an attack angle here, it's like, I've got to convince my client to enter a guilty plea because I don't want to risk looking like an idiot. And I think more and more it just comes with getting comfortable in the courtroom. It's kind of like, look, it's your constitutional right to try a case if you want to take it to trial. If I've kind of told you, that we don't have a great case, or I don't have anything to argue, and then you still take it to trial, that I think judges get that sometimes there's nothing there to fight. There's nobody there that's like, well, why is he taking this case to trial? I think we can kind of get over our ego and just, hey, we're doing what the client wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, part of it, you just got to get over the fear of looking like an idiot. It's a powerful fear.
But it is a powerful fear.
If you can get past it, like it's really liberating. And there are just cases that are total dogs, but as long as it's not a case where the reason you would want them to plead is because you're saving them from a far greater punishment. I mean, it's like the difference between a level 5 DWI and an Ag 1 DWI. Right.
Exactly.
But, on lower level things, one of the things I've told my team is like, okay, let's look at it from another angle. Do we see anything? Let's look at it from another angle. Do we see anything? Okay, well, what are 2 or 3 things that you've always wanted to try in the courtroom and haven't had the chance to yet?
Yeah.
And so using, what is an exercise in futility as an exercise in training, whether it's I want to try this method with my cross of the officer, or I want to reach into the top drawer and pull out the where's the body cam argument that I just dust off every time I have nothing. Right. And it sort of builds up your own kind of repertoire in terms of when you have to do your job. So you may as well make it productive. And I've had judges with me and with people I'm training call me up to the bench afterwards and just be like, yeah, you got to do your job. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Judge Hill in particular.
It's so funny because I feel like it's the same thing that happens in law school where when a professor calls on you and you feel like you're such a total moron in your answer, and literally everybody else is just like, shoo, I'm glad that wasn't me that got called on. They could care less about what you said. It's the same thing in the courtroom. Nobody's really paying that close attention to, I mean, you can do some dumb things in the courtroom, but for the most part, if you're kind of playing by the rule book, then nobody's looking at you cross-eyed as to why a trial is going on. It's just kind of like everybody's doing their job in the courtroom. Even the officers kind of like, I'll get up here, take the stand, say the things I need to say. I mean, that's just part of the process.
Yeah, and I think the judges really get that. Like the people that are doing that job, in our county, mostly either did our job or the DA's job before, and they understand that too, and they almost view it as like a mark of like, okay, this person's kind of rounding into form as someone that can do the job when they can sit up there with nothing, and as long as they're not, being abusive towards courtroom parties or unnecessarily delaying everything, and you're not going to get yelled at for something like that. At least not here in Buncombe County.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, I guess maybe to just kind of conclude maybe that part of the discussion, I just encourage people to try cases, take cases to trial, take risks. Again, if you're putting, a client in jeopardy because they really don't have a case and you're not trying to maybe convince them to take a plea offer that would put them in a better place. If they don't have anything to lose, just set aside the ego and get some trial experience.
That's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know what might come out. You can't win unless you try, and it'll surprise you. Every time you got a case up there, there's always at least one moment, that you kind of glom onto after the fact.
Yeah, and it is funny because I've had this doesn't happen often, but I've had, two cases that I can distinctly remember where I had actually like told my client, we can't win this case. There's not, I don't have any argument. I just want to be clear. I'm not even trying to tell you what to do, but we can't win the case. And the client was like, yes, still want to try it. And then we ended up winning. And like, even as we got the not guilty verdict, I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. It was just like this doesn't add up. I don't really understand, but it's one of those experiences where it's like, well, this is why it's the client's decision and not the lawyer's decision.
You never know. I mean, the human element is important, and it's easy for us to think more like machines.
Yeah.
But you got to keep your eye on everything, and you never know when the officer on the stand is just gonna be honest and be like, you know what, that was 2 years ago. I really don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's always amazing what comes out in a trial that you're just not expecting, based on the DWIR or based on, kind of past experience. It's just so like the evidence is so wild in comparison to the kind of tight-knit report or the, kind of what you're expecting from the video. Once people start talking, you just have no idea what's going to come out of that person's mouth.
That's the most fun part of what we do, really.
It definitely is. Well, Tim, I before we kind of, maybe conclude the call, I kind of wanted to just get your thoughts on kind of trying a jury case in a kind of post-COVID world. You've got a jury trial scheduled, and kind of we're supposed to be the first, I think, jury trial coming out of COVID in Buncombe County. So in terms of preparing for that, tell me just a little bit about what the, thought process looks like in terms of trying to get ready for jury selection and dealing with, masks in the courtroom and all of that.
Well, so far, a lot of my preparation has been on pretrial motions to highlight to the various people who make decisions around the courthouse that we're not post-COVID yet, and it's kind of insane to bring in the general public to have a jury trial at this point in time. I've got like 5 things on appeal in Superior Court right now. They're all misdemeanors. Nobody's in custody. There's not really a big rush on on the interests of justice would somehow require my cases be dealt with immediately.
My feeling is that you are being used as the guinea pig, so that other trials that potentially carry more serious charges can they can kind of feel it out without kind of anything going too sideways.
I'm flattered that they wanted me to be first back in November. I'll be a guinea pig, but God damn it, you can't use my client as a human test subject. We have like constitutional amendments in the Bill of Rights that seemingly prohibit that, right?
Yeah, and that's just a guess. I could be totally off on that. I don't know, but I just think that I would assume that the DA's offices in most places would kind of try to get a misdemeanor appeal or a felony larceny case that they think is going to take 1 to 2, maybe 3 days, as opposed to, a murder case that's going to go on for 6 weeks with COVID in the background. I don't know. I mean, I would just assume that would be how they'd try to push cases.
I think that there's something to that. And were the public health situation not like deteriorating by the day,
right,
that would make sense that you would want to start out with a less witness trial. They had us pegged for the first jury trial when we started back in November. November the 9th was the first week. We filed a motion to continue that was basically alleging, first, the public health situation is not sustainable, but also the various ways that resuming a jury trial would violate my client's constitutional rights. In terms of everything from the masks, which kind of go toward.
Did they talk about whether the witnesses on the stand would be wearing masks or not? Did they say anything about that?
Our plan for the county, which was essentially copied and pasted from stuff that AOC put out without that much thought, said that the witness or a juror can be directed to remove their mask by the judge. Now, you really shouldn't do that because, I mean, this is a very communicable disease.
Right.
There was some talk about having them wear like a face shield, but when the public health director came in and testified as part of my motion, she made it clear that that's not something that can substitute for a mask. It's, we would have to basically fumigate the courtroom for 24 hours if someone did that for 15 minutes. The mask bring up issues of due process and confrontation, in terms of, being able to gauge the credibility of the witnesses by my client and his counsel, by the judge, by the jurors, and even in jury selection and voir dire.
I don't know how you can communicate with a juror with a mask on. I mean, there's just so much that is important in body language in determining whether you've got somebody that's interested, if they're feeling, miffed about something that you've asked, if they're, there's just so much facial expression that is important to being able to meaningfully assess whether or not a juror is going to be prejudicial to your case, to the state's case. I don't see how you can do it with the face mask.
I think it's tough. I think one of the things I would say is that, it puts the onus on you during voir dire to be that much more communicative, right? Like, I mean, when I've done jury trials in the past, I kind of revert into this sort of folksy-ish, good-natured, let's all kind of get to know each other and get them laughing.
I could see you really crushing that approach to things. I think that would spark immediate connection for the most part.
I think it's harder to do that, if people are wearing masks, but you just keep following up with more questions. Now, part of, I'm not going to talk about pending cases and strategies, but, one of the ways to make an example of why you can't just make my chicken shit misdemeanor appeal into a human test subject and assume that it's going to go fine would be that I would want to ask the potential jurors so many more questions during voir dire. When I start my jury trial, we are going to have the longest goddamn voir dire in the history of Buncombe County Superior Court. We're going to know like social security numbers, the names of childhood pets, everything. And some of that again is just strategically, every time I'm up there, the judge says hello to everyone. Sometimes the judge will go through the drudgery of asking the person their name and occupation,
Right.
and if they're married and where they live in the county. But a lot of the times the judge will just have the DA do that.
Right.
And so when the DA does that, it's very wooden and mechanical and charmless, and everyone is bored. And so your ability to show any amount of personality, any level of connection, get people thinking in ways that prove the points you're going to make without being stakeout questions. I mean, that voir dire is where you win. You
Yes,
get them on your side, and you kind of rally them to you. I try to start out with, an icebreaker for everything. Usually it'll be like, we'll come back from lunch and Judge Thornburg will say, "Mr. Henderson, the jury is with you." And I'll say, "You know what, guys? We just had a meal. And if you're anything like me, you're probably going to need a nap right now. That's just the nature of things. We've been here all day in comfortable chairs.
Yeah.
And our hunger has been sated, and it's that time of the afternoon. But I would urge you not to do that, because it would be a serious miscarriage of justice." So I'm going to ask you an icebreaker. And just as an example, the first jury trial I ever had was a DWI. It was a level 2. This guy hit an ambulance with a dead lady in the back of the ambulance. We had nothing. We had literally nothing. There was a private attorney that had this guy in district court for over a year and didn't get paid. And so he went to the DA's office and said, "Can you guys present this? It'll be a really long trial in district court. We'll have to do it over for a jury anyway." So they did a presentment to get it up to Superior Court, and then he withdrew from the case. So it was my
go. Yeah.
And we didn't really have much. And at a certain point, I was just looking for ideas, and Leanne told me, "Well, I mean, this is a blood case, right?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Doesn't everybody hate machines? Why don't we make this about the machine?"
Yep. Yeah.
So my first question to the jurors was, I want you to tell me about the piece of office equipment or in-home appliance that you are most frustrated by at this very moment.
That's awesome.
And people started bitching about their toasters and the copy machines and all of that. And
that is a super powerful question. I love that question. That's
you just sort of set the tone, but you do it in a way that it's not law related. So it gets people talking, and you can kind of see who they're doing that. And I think that even if they are wearing masks, that'll come through. I mean, if they're really engaged, and if they're not, you'll be able to tell that too. I plan to ask a lot of questions about COVID exposure, where did you guys go for New Year's? What did you do?
Right.
Are you used to wearing a mask? We have to all the time because we're in court all the time.
Yep.
But I just had
I was thinking about that. So my wife stays home with our kids, and she was out the other day. She literally doesn't get out even before COVID happened, but now there's really not much getting out. So she sent me a text the other day, "Are you supposed to put the blue part on the outside or the inside of the mask?" This is 9 months into the pandemic. So, I mean, that just shows you how limited the, but again, if you're wearing a mask every day, you're like, well, that's an easy question. But yeah, if you're not comfortable with that, that could be a major problem.
I had 2 weeks off at the holidays, and I we can't really go out and make merriment like we used to. So I didn't really have to wear a mask. And I'm coming back, first day back for court, I got about halfway to the courthouse and realized I'd forgotten my mask. So I had to turn around and putting it back on after that. I was like, this really is a hassle. So, asking people what their mask experiences are. Do they like them? Do they wear them? And then if somebody is like, "Well, no, I don't really like wearing a mask. I don't really wear one normally." Yeah. You go to the next 3 jurors next to them. Juror number 6, does that make you feel comfortable? Juror number 7, how do you feel about that? Juror number 8.
Yeah.
And, that's not just because I want to break the jury trial resumption plan. That's because one of the things that concerns me about the jury pool is that, the risk of folks, hearing all the evidence and the arguments and getting back in the deliberations room and just being like, oh my goodness, there's so many germs. Let's just get out of here. And
yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that it's going to be front and center with at least several jurors on the panel, especially if you're in, sitting in the jury box, you're all faced the same direction. You're not necessarily turning that much, but when you're all sitting around a table, like staring at each other, that just becomes like part of the deal. You can't hear people as well through the masks. You get frustrated about like communication. I just think there's so many problems with that in the whole process.
One thing to show you. So in anticipation of some of these mask-related issues, the administrative office of the court sent out some special masks for us to wear during jury trials. I'm going to show you what it looks like right now.
You look like a ninja or
it's like a Batman villain mixed with like an extra from Eyes Wide Shut, really. But
yeah, that makes you look very endearing. I'm gonna tell you, Tim. I think that should be a permanent part of the wardrobe.
You're also supposed to spray it with like alcohol, like before you put it on. The first time I put it on, I didn't leave it enough time to dry, and I got a little bit tipsy. But I'm pretty sure that I can file a motion with the court to force the prosecuting witness in my DV appeal to have to wear this god-awful truth mask when she testifies to the jury.
That is funny. I like that. That's. I mean, again, it just shows the craziness. I remember when we first started back, June 1st, I had a case out in Jackson County, kind of serious. I think it was a level 1 DWI plea out there, and I had one of the. Is it K95 or N95? I'm trying to think whatever kind of like the nicer masks, medical masks
N95 are. Is the good one. The KN95 is not as good.
Okay. I whatever it was like very tight fitting and, sitting on my face. And I literally, like when I would breathe, it would like kind of go in and out with the breath. And it was very difficult to talk because I hadn't really practiced or anything with it very much in terms of like giving a long-winded explanation. So I started just wearing the, kind of more of like the just medical mask where there's at least a little bit of like room to kind of speak. So, I just think that there's so many, issues in terms of, do you trust the masks of the people, next to you and, do some people get back in the jury deliberation room and just say, to hell with the masks. Like, I'm not wearing this anymore. I've been wearing it long enough. There's nobody around. And then, everybody else has like freak out. I mean, there's just so many potential problems with all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, courts are basically still shut down now, but that's not going to be renewed. And I don't know how quickly they'll get us back into, regular
trial
business
calendar.
in superior court.
Yeah.
But, we will be prepared. One of the main parts of being a public defender is dying for no reason.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I don't think anybody is going to specifically request to be put in front of you, Tim. So I doubt that there will be any seekers of being the first to have that jury trial moment. So
we'll see.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Tim, sharing your wisdom, your battle stories. Definitely best of luck on that jury trial. We'll be all kind of watching closely to see what we need to be doing. It's the Wild West right now. So it's kind of like all trying to figure out what the next step is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why as public defenders, we get all the glamour and the prestige and the lucrative remuneration. I really feel bad for you guys in private business.
Yeah. The benefits are just too much. I totally get it. Sweet. Well, thanks so much, Tim.
All right, man. Anytime.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode of the podcast. If you did, please share the podcast with another freedom fighter in the criminal defense community, and be sure to leave us a rating on iTunes. See you next time.